and this is going to be a different Goblin Grenade podcast. By the time you see this episode, when it drops, I will be on vacation in New Jersey. I'll be spending dang near a month up there, visiting friends, family, and whatnot. So this episode is taking its place of a regularly scheduled Goblin Grenade podcast, and it's going to be a different type of video, just like all the other ones are going to be for this month. This is going to be the behind-the-scenes inner workings of my brain process of making a commander deck. Now, if you've seen the 4-part extravaganza where I go through my over plus 20 commander decks at that time, you'll know I like playing commander and I like building decks in commander. But the problem with that is I downgraded the decks after that. That's why I did that 4-part video series, because just to document some of the commander decks that I had before I broke them apart. And since then, I have, how do you say this? I've kind of, sort of made 4 more commander decks. Now, I bought 2 commander decks in a previous video that you've seen, the Matthews Comic-Con video, where I got Dogmeat and Kaiser. I've heavily upgraded Kaiser and I've kind of upgraded Dogmeat and am adding a few more cards to Dogmeat as I speak. I've already made Kaikar. I've already made another commander deck or 2 since I made those videos. So needless to say, I love building commander decks. It's one of my favorite things, and I've always loved making commander decks. So this is going to be the process that I do, and the first step is getting inspiration. Sometimes inspiration is a column. Sometimes inspiration, most of the time, is watching a video, whether that be game nights or Commander Clash or Quest for the Jank Lord, Commander at Home, EDH Dragons, any number of these channels that are great doing commander content. I will see occasionally a commander where I'm like, I want to play that. Sometimes that's just as simple as pulling up the deck list and seeing what I have in my weirdly massive collection, but not massive at the same time. And kind of sort of, seeing if I can order the cards through various means or, buying them at a store or trading for them. So between all that, inspiration comes from many different ways. Articles, videos, even going in commander games in local game stores that I go to. Sometimes I'll see a deck where I'm like, ooh, I want to do that, but I want to do my own take of that. So this is where this process comes from, and it started, this particular deck that we're going to do this journey on, when Adventures in Forgotten Realms came out. Adventures of Forgotten Realms had 2 game mechanics. Rolling dice, which normally, depending on what it was D10. A lot of the cards had that mechanic, or venture into the dungeon. Venturing into the dungeon is a separate 3-card pile when you meet the when you meet the prerequisites or trigger the ability to delve deeper into the dungeon, or at the beginning of your upkeep, you delve deeper into the dungeon. There's many ways to advance into the dungeons after you choose one. And then when you complete it, you get to venture again. I wanted to combine both of these. Dice rolling, adventures, dungeons, and also as many named D&D characters and spells as possible. To make a Dungeons and Dragons deck like I'm just rolling a character sheet, I'm rolling up into one and just rolling the dice and going on adventures. The problem with that is when Adventures in Forgotten Realms came out, you either had to do one or the other. There was no real way to cross-pollinate both types of decks, especially with the limitation that I put on having as many named commanders, having as many named characters and spells, stuff like Magic Missile that never even saw play in Standard, and yet I'm wanting to put it in a commander deck because Magic Missile. So what happened was there wasn't really much support, and I just kind of had to sit on my hands and wait, and maybe that day never came. Then Commander Legends 2 Adventures of Baldur's Gate came out, and a little bit more support was given for both dice rolling and dungeons with the take the initiative, and venture into the dungeons, and there was another dungeon that they made. So now there's a little bit more support for that. And procrastination is definitely a thing when you've technically, since you've gotten into Commander 5 years ago, you've made 40 Commander decks in that time. Sometimes you get scattered shot. Then other times, inspiration finally kicks in, and you realize, once you did a little bit of research, there was a card that came out a couple of years ago that may help you out in this particular scenario. So that is the first step complete. Except we're going to go into the research process now. Now I'm going to break it down into the step-by-step researching, pulling cards, playtesting, doing math. Yes, math. Like, I do some math here for the mana bases. I don't just simply, when it comes to mana bases, we'll get to it, but I do 36, and then I try to do percentages of pips and whatnot from a book I read when I was in high school about Magic the Gathering, and and I know those things have changed, but for some reason for me, it still works, damn it. So here we go. Here's the research portion of the video. I've been wanting to do the dice roll deck for a while in Commander, but I also, since Battles for Boulder Gate came out, Commander Masters or whatever, Legends 2 or whatever, I've been wanting to do the D&D deck, which is roll the initiatives, rolling dice, have as many character D&D cards in the 100 that I can do. So mainly it's going to be drawing from those two sets, but the problem I ran into is a commander. As you can see, of the precons, the ones that was actually dungeon stuff for the most part, that's Esper, and the deck itself didn't do many things that had cards that ventured into the dungeon. The commander itself was the engine to get those things done. So then I was looking around, blah, 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 and then I saw this from a dice rolling deck. A dice rolling deck. The deck name is Tribal. This was 2 years ago, back when Wizards was only just starting to like say that we had a problem with that name. So don't give them hate for it. They haven't updated this in 2 years. But the commander that they were using was Garth One-Eye, which is Wooburg. And Garth One-Eye, when it comes into play, and you know, it doesn't have haste, but when you tap it, choose a card name that hasn't been chosen from among Disenchant, Brain Geyser, Terror, Shivan Dragon, Regrowth, and Black Lotus. Create a copy of the card with the chosen name. You may cast the copy. You still pay its mana costs. The thing about this is, it's not as impactful with all the other decks that all the other cards. It's not going to play or add to certain mechanics that the D&D sets had, but it's also not going to limit me in what cards I can bring and what colors I can play. The problem is, it is a Wooburg, so that's going to be an issue. Even if we never cast Garth One-Eye, we still have to have at least a few pieces of mana of that color that we're not using. This is going to be a 4-color deck because black does not do some of the things I want to do, but also we could basically make this a Jeskai deck and swing in the green for ramp and the black for some kill spells or to some of the other things. So basically this is where I was starting. Faraday, Devil's Chosen, which is a deck I wanted to make earlier. It's got Dark One's own luck. Whenever you roll one or more dice, Faraday, Devil's Chosen gains flying and menace until end of turn. If any of those results were 10 or higher, draw a card. But this was dice rolling. When it comes to venturing into the dungeon, entering the dungeon is what it was called. One of the better commanders for that, I felt, was Barrowin of Clan Undor. When Barrowin of Clan Undor enters the battlefield, venture into the dungeon. Whenever Baron of Clan Undor attacks, return up to one target creature card with mana 3 value or less from the graveyard to the battlefield if you've completed a dungeon. So this is one of the better ones. Okay, so now we've got a decent choice between the two decks here. How do we split the difference? Maybe we go Hammer Pashar, Rune Seeker. Room abilities of dungeons you own trigger an additional time. Okay, maybe that. Then it was, let's look at Adventures of Forgotten Realms commanders that you can do. So there's Volo, not what we're trying to do. Tiamat, nope, not even gonna with Tiamat. Moon Dancer, +1/+1 counters, equipments, Delina's great, but Xanthar, people will hate me. Minsk, I never got around to making. Dice rolling, treasure tokens, drawing cards, Drizzt I tried to make. Nothing's really piquing my interest here. And the other thing is, it's color. I need at least 3 to 4 colors for this deck, I feel. Because focusing on Drizzt, that is a green and white and nothing else. So we're very limited on that, where green and white really doesn't do many dice rolling. They do the dungeon stuff, but there's not many opportunities to roll the dice. Blue and red roll dice all day, every day. Black kind of is the weird go-around of venturing into the dungeon. So what colors? There's no really even good 3-color commanders that do things like that. Like Gala, Kindred of Hope was a commander. You can look at the top card of your library. It's Aura and Spells deck. Cephas is a dungeon deck, but it requires things dying on the battlefield. Prosper exiles the card. When you play it, create a treasure. Vondrus is definitely making tokens where, none of these cards help venturing or rolling the dice. Commander Legends, Battle for Baldur's Gate, the backgrounds, the commanders, Miracle, nope. Rodica, I've gone through the list. None of them venture into the dungeon as good as they should, or help propel venturing stuff into the dungeon. I bought the Gnarlease deck. Gorion Adventures was one of the commanders I made. Astrion. None of these commanders truly help dungeon stuff. Like, we can just look. Like, I'm looking right now. There's good cards that do great things. I mean, I have a Jaheira in my Chatterfang deck because I'm a horrible human being. But there's so many great commanders out there, but none of them are doing deck things. None of them are doing venture stuff. Even the recommendeds. So eventually, and if you've been reading the screen, which I'm hoping to clip out, we will come across Garth One-Eye. Garth One-Eye is Wooburg. One of each color for a 5/5 human wizard. Tap it, choose a card name that hasn't been chosen amongst Disenchant, which is destroy target enchantment. Brain Geyser, draw X cards. Terror, destroy target non-black creature. Shivan Dragon is if memory serves me, 4/4 dragon that you pump 1 red mana into it and it gives it +1/+0 till end of turn. Regrowth is return target card from graveyard to the hand. And Black Lotus is obviously the key card there. It's a 0-drop artifact, tap and sack, add 3 mana of any color to your mana pool. The Black Lotus card itself is just the premier card. Anytime you see cards selling for millions of dollars, it's usually a Black Lotus. This doesn't help, but it doesn't hinder our ability to do dice rolling and commanders. Now, this deck is a dice rolling deck, which is okay. It's a 5-color dice rolling deck that is splashing green for stuff like Ramp and Wild Endeavor and Song of Inspiration. It's doing some of the dice rolling. It's having most of the dice rolling that you could have in there. It's also using some illegal cards from some of the unsets, but that's okay because Kark's other thumb is actually very funny if you read the flavor text. Kark was the kind of goblin who'd lose his thumb in a wager and come right back with double or nothing. That's why I love Kark. So the thing about this deck on Moxfield was that it was the inspiration. It was the lightning bolt to my brain, no pun intended, that I needed to actually start getting inspiration to make this deck. So then it went down the rabbit hole of why Sephiroth of the Hidden Ways isn't a really good deck to play with dice rolling and dungeon mechanics. We're going to keep the Commander Legends Battle for Baldur's Gate up, and Faraday and Barrowin and Hamish Pashur. Probably won't. Mechanical Memories was an article that gave me some inspiration. Oh yeah, I should add in Explore the Underdark because you take the initiative. And then we're just going to do that and do that. So there was a lot of inspiration that was found just from finding somebody using Garth One Eye to do some dice roll and shenanigans. Now in my brain, I'm like, I can use Garth One Eye as well because I do have the card already in my possession. Me and my girlfriend, I was supposed to make a Garth One Eye deck for her, and we never got around to it. As you can see on Card Kingdom, I can spend $1 and get this card again. It's no skin off my back. But that being said, now we can get into the planning phase of this deck. So what is the planning phase? Well, the planning phase is looking at some of the tabs that I've already had open, plotting out, maybe even hand. For me, I'm a very paper pen type of guy. I like to write stuff down, even if my handwriting is worse than Doctor's chicken scratch. I'm pretty sure in an alternate reality, former life, whatever, I was a doctor because my handwriting is terrible at it. Like, I have pens at my computer desk just in case. So we will write down maybe sometimes cards that I think are cool, that I think might actually work with the deck, and then just pull as many as I can. In Commander, obviously it's your Commander or a background, but generally speaking, you only have your one Commander card, and then you have the 99. That's the 99 card deck that follows your Commander. So we have to figure out the 99. What's in the 99 other cards besides Garth One Eye that are doing dice rolling and initiative stuff and venturing into the dungeon? So part of that is going to be going through my collection. The other part of that is going to actually be looking at websites like EDHREC, Scryfall, Moxfield, MTG Goldfish, many other avenues out there, and see just what people have been building with it. Using EDHREC and Moxfield and Scryfall to get inspiration is not a dirty word, shouldn't be considered anything, and I'm sorry. Net decking isn't... If you're using net decking as a derogatory term against a person who's playing the game, by this point, we're well after 15 minutes in the video. Go fuck yourself. Yes, I play off-meta stuff all the time. I understand that net decking, meta building, and whatever is some of the best stuff. Like, there's a reason why these decks win consistently in Standard, in Modern, in Pioneer, because they are the best decks. And sometimes people don't want to do research, and other times people don't have time to do research, especially when it comes to Commander. Like, the casualest of formats. The stakes in Commander have never been lower in Magic the Gathering. Unless you're playing competitive Commander, and if that's the case, I'm not there. Sorry, it's not my blood to do competitive Commander. I'm not going to fault you for doing competitive Commander. It's just not for me. Understand, in my time, in my experience, every time it's been a competitive game, I haven't had as much fun as I've had in casual games. And most of my decks are casual except for one or two, but if it gets competitive, I can raise the stakes a little higher, especially with Edgar Markov. That's the one that I go, okay, this is my best deck, and it really is. But it's just in the same token when it comes to video games, like Battle Royale games. I cannot play. Cannot stand Battle Royale games, and that, the Fortnites, the PUBGs, the Warzones. I can't play them. I'm just not built for that anymore. Maybe 15 years ago, if they had dropped, I would have been playing those games religiously. But now that I'm way past my prime when it comes to video games, and the place that I watch videos on and live streams, but like the twitch reflexes needed to play those games and first person shooters, I can barely sustain Halo Infinite at this point. And I used to be a beast in that game, not in Halo Infinite, but I used to be a beast in Halo pretty much up until like 5. Hey, well, when Halo 5 dropped, it was when I was like, man, my skills have diminished in these first-person shooters. So that's why I can't play those games. But that sidetrack diversion aside, let's go into some research. So we have, obviously, the rolling dice with Garth One Eye. We have to build around getting 5 mana if we ever want to see our commander, because it does do some pretty awesome things, especially that Black Lotus. Like most of the time, we're going to be using Brain Geyser, Regrowth, Black Lotus. So I'm going to actually look at some of the deck list here. Remember, we don't have to put every dice rolling card in there. It's just the good ones, especially ones that we have. Because with the dice rolling cards, especially in a 5-color, sometimes you have to use some weird cards. Brazendorf is actually really good for what we're trying to do, too, because we're going to be rolling a lot of dice. But it's a one-of, so that's the problem. See, like, this is a really good card, but if we can't, like, get backups to that type of effect, then there's no point for me. Is because remember, we're doing 2 things. We're dice rolling and we are adventuring. If I have Chaos Channeler, it's definitely going in, because when it attacks, we roll the d20 and then exile the top card of my library. We may play it this turn on a 1 through 9, 10 to 19, exile the top 2. You may play them, and then on 20, exile the top 3, and that's on attack trigger. Delena's making it. Delena is in this deck, and I have a copy of Delena, along with the Windseer, probably Earth Cult Elemental. That's only on an EBT. We're looking for that 10 to 20, because it's each opponent. If we get that 1 through 9, we got to sack a permanent too. Faraday. Faraday's definitely going in the deck. It's really good, because we're doing nothing but rolling d20s and low, like, you know, the base version of statistics and math. Half the time we roll the dice, we're going to be drawing a card with Faraday on the field. Feywild Trickster is one of those cards as well that we're going to need, because it makes a blue fairy dragon. It makes a creature. Herald of Herald. No, we don't need that. Hoarding Ogre. I do like Hoarding Ogre, because when it attacks, we get to make treasures. Lightfoot Rogue. We probably don't need to put that in. Loathsome Troll. Pixie Guide, though, is important. If you roll 1 or more dice, instead roll that many dice plus 1 and ignore the roll lowest. Yeah, Pixie Guide, there's a couple different ways of Pixie Guide too. Like I think Barbarian class, if you were to roll 1 or more dice. So we can double up and have backups of Pixie Guide. Scion of Stygia. No, we don't need to tap. Spark Double. Ooh, I can see why that's in there. So yeah, we're just basically looking around and finding what cards are going to work just from off this list. All right, so that's us kind of, you know, getting a bare bones necessity of things. We'll now go into not that, but we'll go into Barrow, because I'm obviously knowing fully well what we know now. Definitely already had already knew that going into beforehand, but, you know, kind of solidifying the idea that the dice rolling side of our deck is red and blue. Our dungeon mechanics side is going to be Orzhov. And green is just playing the ramp game. And now this is EDH Rec, the other site that on the dice rolling, we were using Moxfield. Now I'm going to show you what EDH Rec does. EDH Rec I kind of like. You know, we can search Barrowin of Clan Under as a commander, as a card, average deck decks. We're using it as a commander right now. The themes, blank, treasure, clerics, party. We can do any of those. Budget, any budget. Low budget, high budget. But right now we're just looking at everything. These are the high synergy cards in the deck, but we're looking for venturing into the dungeon. Now we're going to look at that. I'm actually going to right click, open new tab. Enters a battlefield or attacks, venture into the dungeon. No, not plussing. Looking for the number. Okay, we may have that. I know Triumphant Adventurer is going to make it in, because it ventures into the dungeon, and when it attacks, we adventure into the dungeon. Fate's Reversal, return up to 1 target creature card from your graveyard to your hand, venture into the dungeon. Yeah. We're basically looking for anything that says venture into the dungeon. Or another non-token enters the battlefield under your control, venture into the dungeon. I don't know if we have this card, Radiant Solar, because that's not the commander deck that I bought from that. White Plume Adventurer, though, I think I do have. But as you can see, this is what we're going to be doing. We experiment, we look through, we're going to look at, also I need to, and this is why I kept this particular one up, because of Seasoned Dungeoneer, even though I don't think I have it. Explore the Underdark. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards and or gate cards. Put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. You take the initiative. That's our green mana ramp. It is 5 color, but it does 2 things. Mana ramp gets us into the dungeon. So as you can see, we definitely do a lot of research when it comes to making commander deck. And this is where we go to MTG Goldfish to check out the venturing dungeon cards that we're looking for. I know Sararak is good. We're just getting a gauge here of what cards to actually use to venture into the dungeon. As I said before, the blue and red will be our dice rolling mechanic for the most part, and our white and black will be going into the dungeon. Safana is a good card. I'm thinking about Chattering Skeletons, and there's a couple of cards that I'm not completely aware of yet, but looking through this particular deck, I see a few cards that can definitely make the cut. Ravenloft Adventurer, that's the first time I saw that card, and I'm like, ooh, that's pretty good. We ain't afford an Elvish Norn, Mother of Machines in this deck, that's for sure. That's a future upgrade, if you ask me. And then, we see the Immovable Rod, Signet, obviously. Doubler's Torch is a great equipment as well. Lightning Greaves, Dungeon Map, Panharmonicon, I'm looking at. And now we move over to EDH Rec to see a couple other cards that weren't on the Goldfish website, to see what other venturing into the mechanic cards that we can use. Obviously, there's another Safina, Sun Titan. I love Sun Titan. It doesn't see much play in Commander anymore, but I do love it. And this is where I start figuring out maybe flicker effects like Flicker Wisp and Ephemerate might actually make the deck. And we see a couple other cards here. I'm trying to keep it also within the parameters of keeping it within the D&D sets. Baldur's Gate and Forgotten Realms in Magic the Gathering. I don't want to use, if I can prevent it, other cards. So now that we have our list of cards that we should pull and or look up to see if we have, we actually go to that side of the room and actually start pulling cards. This is where stuff gets real. Shit gets real right now when it comes to making this deck. We start pulling cards and we start seeing what cards along with the list that we have that might be able to do some things in the deck. And my order, I go rares and mythics, because I have these ordered up and alphabetized. The rares and mythics and the commons and uncommons. I actually have commons and uncommons, like staples, if you will, or cards I think I will use later. Cards that I'm always going to need, I feel. Alphabetized, separated by color. And I have the same thing for rares. But I have 3 monster boxes full of commons and uncommons that I'm going to eventually either have to just trade in bulk and just get stuff with it, or actually go through it and figure out a system for it, because it's rapidly approaching with the soon rotation in standard that I'm going to have to make a little bit more space, because the way I have done it is most of the time I will actually have in the gift bundle boxes and whatnot cards that are in standard right now. There's a lot of cards that are rotating out of standard in a couple of months. I have no place to put them on the bottom drawers, on the bottom shelves of my Magic bookcase. So you'll see relatively very soon what I mean. So before we get to the getting, this is just micro. This is what it is. You know, that is a opened, emptied, just like the box, because it is foily. You know, some commander boxes. Then these are all commanders. This is a special project that I've been working on for at least 2 years at this point. These are just a simple eventual preview, but it's like just the damage that the cards would go through when the game first started. But these are all commander decks. Some of these are new ones. That's an upgrade to Edgar Markov. These are some standard decks. What is this? The Outlaws of Thunder Junction pre-release I did. All these are dice. And then, you know, this is the rares and the commons and the pre-made mana bases. And then these are rares. These are rares. These are just nothing but foil common and uncommons that I have no idea what to do with. The good book. And then we have just all the standard-ish stuff. There's a couple things behind there that are not standard. But, you know, these are basically just the the bundles that I buy. I like to buy the bundles because they do look nice. Just random planeswalkers from that. Some random red cards right there. Tokens, more tokens. Some other special things that I'm going to have to look through these as well. And these are 3, 4,000 count boxes full of commons and uncommons that I'm also probably going to have to look for in this video. What we can see here, besides my basically mana box, we have tokens. And if we slide these over, it's actually harder to do than you think. You know, that's all of our rares right there. Tokens part 1, because part 2 is right behind it. So many tokens I have. Commander decks. We also have rare lands and all the black cards in there. We have uncommon commanders, which we're going to need to go through because there are some cards that were in there. Commander decks, more commander decks and other decks. Rares. You can't see it, but, you know. Then we have on this one, commons. Artifacts, duels, white, red, green, and black. And then we have blue and land uncommons in that box. We also have a couple, this is our commander that we're playing, Garth, One Eye. But we also have a couple of things under construction on this particular part. Needless to say, this is where the adventure begins. And the dice rolling, technically speaking, because that's what we're making. But now I'm going to go through most of these bottom shelves right here and pull the cards that we already looked up. So this is the process of me, time-lapsed, going through the commons and uncommons. I always start with the box that I have of commons and boxes that I have of commons and uncommons that are staples or cards that I kind of know I'm going to use in the future, just to make it easier. But as you can see, this is a very, very long process as I'm looking through basically every single color that I have. The commons and uncommons boxes that I have set aside, those are separated by color and alphabetized. So it makes it a little bit easier for me to look at the list and see what I need to get in a halfway decent way. But then there's so many that it just takes a very long time. But I try to at least grab as many cards from these piles as I can, so I can make future Dom's life a little bit easier. That being said, though, it is a nightmare. That takes a while. That was time-lapsed and all, and the actual time of recording, it was like a good 15 minutes. of just going through things. And I missed a few things as well, but this is just the initial. Let's just get as many cards off the list as possible, and then we're going to start actually not marking them off the list and seeing what we missed, and then going back here. I'm not going to re-record me going back here to do the second pass through of cards, but you know, it happens. These decks don't get made like that for me. Sometimes they take a couple days, so the next time you'll probably see me, which will be the next cut after this shot, probably going to be the next day. So next day, and I have the rares now. The rares are definitely alphabetized and separated by color, so this makes this job a little bit easier. We're in the middle of me doing this, as you can see from the pile of cards already there, and it's just a simple process of checking the list that I made and making sure I have cards, and if I see a card or two or 50 that I think might fit the deck, I will put that in with the rest of the pile. And it's, once again, it's a long process of just going through these cards. Even if it's alphabetized, it takes a bit. And this is the stack of cards that I'm dealing with. I think the count that I had was like 170 cards, and that's almost all the lands, but look at that. That's just a Garth One Eye right there. He's making it happen. So it's day 2 of the Adventure Garth One Eye dice rolling deck. You can see the pile of cards already. And this is just going through the staples and whatnot that I already have pre-sorted and alphabetized. But then a terrible thought came across me. I know I have cards that I should have. So this list right here, in conjunction with the other list I have, I now have to go through those boxes of bulk. The only thing that'll make this slightly easier is these boxes of bulk are at least sorted by color and nothing else. Yeah. All 3 of these. Sorted by color, nothing else, but I have to now go through all of this to probably find 5 cards. One part of me wishes I could just lazy tax this, and that's ordering cards online. But most of the cards that I need, I don't want to order 8 cards from 8 different places and get hit with $10 of shipping from 8 different places, because those places won't have as many cards. I could do TCG Direct, but I want to save that for some of the other cards that I know for a fact I'm going to need. So now, here's misery. Just pure, unadulterated misery, because most of these cards, from my recollection, have nothing of value. And this is the nightmare of the bulk box. Time lapse, once again, you can see it's a massive amount of cards, and these are only sorted by color. I'm doing them upside down because I'm just looking for symbol. I'm looking for the Adventure and Forgotten Realm symbols and the Battles for Boulder Gate symbols, because that's all I need. That's the cards that I'm looking for from those 2 sets. It made it a little bit easier. Had I had to do it and look through each card the other way, this would have taken me days to do. So it was a little cheat code that I used. So that was one color. That time lapse was just blue, and we found 1 card that we needed. Found a few more cards, but I don't know if they're going to fit in the deck. But you may have seen me, like we found 1 card from the list. And now we have red to do, white, black, and green. I'm not going to subject you to that. So the next time you'll see me, we'll be back at the computer desk, right there, where, how do I say it? The pile of cards you saw earlier is going to get bigger. So, a few hours later, and we have most of the list. Got through a fair amount. Yes, it took me 2 hours to go through all these. Got a fair amount. Stuff off the list, stuff that I didn't have on the list, but could possibly go in the deck. Now we figure out how to make this thing. And that is going to be all for day 2. Next cut, it'll be day 3, and I'll probably update things and whatnot. I have a new list that I have to order cards from now. Day 3. And now we just get these piles of every color and start making cuts. I want to guess I have about 200 cards in total. The lands are right here. This will be a separate part of the video as well, because there's a few ways we can go with this if we want to keep it Baldur's Gate, because we have Gond Gate. So we can take it in one or two directions only if Gond Gate makes its way into the 100, and that will actually affect the green. But I want to do that after I get the base version of the 99 first. So basically, out of all these cards that we have to make cuts, and I'm going to go in a weird direction with, sometimes people do cuts. I break it down by color. So I'm going to start on the white cards, the greens, the reds, the blues, the blacks, the gold cards, the artifacts, and then once I have those locked in, I will then work on the mana base, because the mana base, as I just alluded to earlier, it all depends if we keep this particular card in or not, because some of these cards in green that we search for, like Explore the Underdark, say basic or gates. So that being said, the problem with the gates is I already have a deck that runs gates. That is my Go Shintai deck. It's the backup WinCon. And Gond Gate, I got a couple of them when the set came out because I knew that was going to be a key component card. But also, with the green, do we have to add Spelunking in as a backup to Gond Gate? So that's the argument right now. I'm going to not bore you with another time lapse of this. I will tell you exactly what the process is of me breaking this down. I will take the cards and I will separate them into 2 piles for each color at first. I will keep the creatures in one pile. I will keep the spells in another pile. I will then break them down CMC, converted mana costs, and then I will have them basically top and bottom. Top will be the creatures, 1 drops, 2 drops, 3 drops, 4 drops, and then on the bottom of those will be the spells in the 1 drops, 2 drops, 3 drops. I call it my arena is showing. And I do this in drafts too, but I just tend to like that layout way better because I've done so much arena, and it drastically changed how I think of things. Because now I can just look at the top and go, when I'm drafting, oh, all right, I have 14, 13, 15 creatures or 18 creatures. I need to make X amount of cuts, or I need to add X amount of creatures to it and whatnot. So that's how I break it down. I do it each color, and then gold, and then artifacts, and then I will figure out mana base then, because remember, we still have a list in the notebook of cards that I have to still order, but I at least want to get the deck finalized before I start ordering some cards. So after the first round of cuts, this is the stack that we have left. This is the stack that is getting eliminated off the bat. Didn't make the first round of cuts. This is the party cards, except for those are just tokens, but these are mainly the party cards, and it depends if we have enough support for party, if some of these make it in. So yeah, round 2 will happen in a little bit. Whittling it down further, round 3, this is the stack of cards that aren't making it. This is what we have so far. Still have some more cuts to make, but I think the deck is starting to take some shape. I'm starting to notice a few things. Cut a lot of the green for ramp. That's what it should be. And cards that were cute, like mainly these 3, and it breaks my heart that I can't play them because these are about as D&D as you can get, but they do not fit the theme at all with what I'm trying to go for. There are other cards in here, obviously, like, you know, Gretchen and whatnot. So, you know, there'll be some D&D named characters in here, but As a side note, also looking like the party mechanic might not fit after all. That is a lot of cards for party, and that is definitely could be a deck unto itself. But right now we probably got cuts 4, 5, and 6 to still make. So this is how I do it now. I counted how many cards are in this pile. And then basically I have 32 cards to remove to get to that magical number 64. Just to start the deck off, I want to do 36 lands, 64 spells, along with the commander. But we still have 32 cuts to make out of these. It might suck, not gonna lie. But these 32 are going to be important, because then when we get to 64, we still theoretically then, at that point, can look at cards to buy to upgrade the deck. Yep, we're nowhere near done, folks. And this is the culling, if you will. This is the process that I have to use to basically get the deck in order. We have about 15 more cuts to make from the initial 32. So I basically do the top, as I said before, top are creatures, bottom are spells. I put them in the CMC, and now we're at 15 at that moment. And then we whittle it down a little further. Now we only have 4 more cuts to make. But as you can see, the deck is starting to take shape. And we do have the cards that we want in there, as the pile of cards to the side of us is definitely telling you what is not being used. The party mechanic did not make it into this edit, but 4 more cuts to go. So this is the 64 cards, 63 technically, along with the commander in the deck so far. These are the crappy proxies I made to playtest a little bit, and to see what we can improve and take out of this. These cards came from this list. Pricing is TCG Player, and we're going to see if some of these work. And might see some arena gameplay, because I might wind up making this an arena as the best as I can to see what happens, and to see also if anything actually I'm missing, because I'm really thinking I might need to put a spelunking in this deck, and I think I have one. So yeah, there we go. So at the moment, it's complete with the crappy proxies I made. You can also, and explain how you can also print them out and cut them out just to get a feel for it, and explain that we're about to do our best to get this deck as close to on arena as we can, to do a little bit more play testing and to figure out the mana. And this is us testing arena, seeing if the board wipes work. Now, with arena, Garth does not exist on arena, so we kind of had to do a 100 card singleton and go up against Sparky just to test the deck out to see if it works. So there's not going to be optimal plays being made from the gameplay that you can see. It's more meets just theory crafting, testing, seeing what works, what doesn't work. And so far, Nader, Selfless Paladin, shows how much of an all-star the card is in the early testings. We're just trying to goldfish here and get a feel for how the deck wants to play. And as you can see right now, we're just, doing minor game testing. I want to see if Dungeon Map will work. And in this build, it definitely does. As you can see, we can venture into the dungeon every turn, guaranteed, as long as Dungeon Map at 3 untapped mana is available to us. We start popping off, getting the dungeons completed. And you can just see how, when this deck pops off, how much of a problem it becomes. And this is the first sighting a teleportation circle, and I really wanted to see what teleportation circle can do in this deck. And now Sparky's kind of like out of it at this point, so I have free reign to test as much as I want. And I'm going to test teleportation circle to see if it's actually fitting in the deck and see if I need to cut it. And I think we take the Nadar out, because that always ventures, and then it bounces back in, and then we get to choose another adventure. And I think I wanted to do Tomb of Annihilation because I know a Sararak is in the deck, and this is a little bit later on in the same game. Now I'm getting the dice rolling testing with Pixie Guide out, so now we roll 2 dice. I mean, Barbarian classes out there. Now we have the bounce spells and Ephemerate. We're making fairies because of the Feywild. And this is where the deck starts popping off, and I start getting a feel for how the deck is going to be playing in the future. I don't think Saheeli made the cut in paper, but as you can see, we're going to Ephemerate Nadar. And this showed me how awesome Nadar Selfless Paladin is. Because not only do we ephemerate it, but we can also teleportation circle it at the end of the turn. But this time I think I just decided to kill Sparky because I want to see what Barrow and Clan Undar does. So we get a Charming Prince back, and we're going to exile Nadar and bring him right back, venture into the dungeon again at the end of the turn. It gets silly really fast if this deck is left unchecked. Just like every deck can pop off if left unchecked. But this proved to me that the deck can be fun to play. Yeah, go down to negative 16 there, Sparky. So for the math portion of this video, you're going to hate this, but this is very important. First thing we got to do, we got to count the pips, which are in the converted mana cost of all the cards. Right there, that would be a pip. Let me get a pen, make it a little easier. That's a pip. Each one of these pips, not the number, just the symbol. They're called pips. And we count each one in the deck, except for colorless and artifacts, because they can be used with anything, but for the most part. But we just count each one of these pips until we get the grand total. The grand total in this deck was 79 colored pips. Don't worry about the 96. I screwed up math a little bit. This is the math that I do for coming up with lands. A rough guide. I had a book when I was in high school eons ago. It was like how to play and learn Magic and whatnot, and there was great mathematical equations there for what I use to get the mana basis for my commander decks. It is hella outdated, I'm not even gonna lie. That information kind of sort of no longer applies, but is used much, but I like to use it. So we have the colored pips: white 31, U is blue because there's black, 19, black 15, red 8, green 6. So we take the total color pips in the deck, which is 79, color pip divided by the color pip, white, black, whatever, divided by the total number of pips equals the percentage of lands that we need in the deck for that particular color. So for the white pips, as we have 31, 31 divided by 79 is 0.39, and we just swing that decimal point over 2 spots, 39%. We do somewhat round up if need be as well. So with the math totals, with white, 31 divided by 79 is 39%. We already went through that. Blue is 19 divided by 79, 24%. Black is 15, 79%. Of 79 pips, 18%. We rounded up to 19 because it's like 18.7. Red is 8 divided by 79, and that was almost even 10%. And then green is 6 divided by 79 at 7%. It was actually like 6%, but we rounded up. So now, the next set of math, and this is why I kind of like doing this, because I like math a little bit. My favorite number is Rayo's number in Tree 3. Look up the videos for those. Those are actual concepts, not even numbers. But now we use the base mana that we want to do, 36. I always start with 36 lands in my commander decks. So if 36 multiplied by 0.39 gives us 14 lands that we'll need. That'll give us the almost 40% of lands that in white that we need. Then if we follow that same equation for blue, 36 times 0.24 gives us 8.64 lands that we need. We rounded that up to 9. Then for black, 36 times 0.18 gives us 6.48, and we just kind of kept it at 6 lands for black. And then for red, 36 times 0.10, that was the easy one, that's 36. 3.6, we rounded up to 4. And then for green, it was 36 multiplied by 0.07 for 2.52. We rounded up to 3 just to keep a little bit, just to get a little bit more green in the deck, and that'll give us our 36 total lands. Very confusing, I know, but it's, once again, it's a rough guide, all based off 36 lands. We count the mana pips in the converted mana cost, which is the top number of casting costs. Then we see how many colored pips we have in the deck. In this particular one at the moment, there's 79. Colored pips divided by the color of the pip, divided by the total color pips, gives us the percentage of lands that we need. And then we do that to get the percentage of lands we need for the color, and then we do this to get how many lands we need in the deck. And also, the proxies today, they've been ordered for the most part. There was one card I just didn't want to order, but we got almost all of them ordered now. So, and in playtesting, as you saw, Nadar definitely made it into the deck. We ordered that as well. They should be here in a couple days, hopefully, before I leave for my vacation in New Jersey. We have the lands, the basics. We have the slow fetches, the lairs, the wedge lands. We have some survey lands and the smoldering marsh, which actually should be over here. We have the wedge lands. We have the survey lands. We have the slow lands. And then we have a triome and a couple other slow lands as well. I want to focus on these because they actually have the swamp forest, swamp mountain types. So when we use our slow fetches, or when we upgrade the deck, we can use real fetches. We can find those as well, along with the triome. You can find a basic with it as well, but because it says for an island or swamp, we can find a swamp forest, a swamp mountain, an island plains. So the general consensus on what I do is before the fetches make their way into play, say Zatora's Proving Ground is definitely going to make it, so it's a swamp, a mountain, and a forest. So what do we want to kick out of the swamp, mountain, forest to replace with the Zatora? Obviously, we have 6 swamps, so I would like to take a swamp out at first to replace with a Zatora. Fair enough. Now we'll do it a little... Now we'll do a smoldering marsh, okay? Swamp mountain. So what would I want to take out of these? This time I'm going to take out a mountain and replace the smoldering marsh. Now let's move it over to one of these. We'll move it over to Atrevia Ruins, one of the lair lands. I actually am a big fan of the lair lands for the budget. Enters battlefield, sack it unless you return a non-lair land you control to its owner's hand. So I can basically bounce anything for a tri-land. You don't want to play too many of these in a commander deck. Maybe 2, maybe 3. We will count the Zatora, the Triome, as one of them. But this time, what would we want to take out? Plains, a forest, or an island? I'm going to take out a plains because we have a lot of plains. So we will replace that with the Atrevia Ruins. And we do this down the line until, we get the mana base to start with. So now that we've got these non-basic lands figured out, Okay. I didn't want to use too many. As I said, I only wanted to use 3 of these, and that's the 3. We play mostly all of the swamp and plains islands, the survey lands and the slow lands. Now we have exotic orchard, public thoroughfare. I'll put over here. We know we need the dungeon descent. It does play in. Command Tower, definitely. Ash Barrens, because the basic land cycling is important with the 5-color deck. And Exotic Orchard is going to be important because that'll be a land of any color our opponents can produce. And because we're playing Wooburg, all 5 colors, this will activate for at least 3 of them. And don't forget, we still have our slow fetches to put into play here. So I start with Command Tower because that counts as everything. And I think I want to replace an island with the Command Tower. Because Ash Barrens is going to replace this Plains. So we're going to take a Plains away, put that Ash Barrens in. Dungeon Descent will replace another Plains with the Dungeon Descent. And Exotic Orchard, once again, another Plains for an Exotic Orchard. Now, unfortunately, I wanted to try to experiment and play the Theater, the Overlook, and the Courtyard. When it enters the battlefield, sack it. When you do, search your library for a basic mountain, forest, or plains card. Put it into battlefield tap, then shuffle, you gain 1 life. This is not the deck for these type of lands. Public Thoroughfare, eventually I'm going to put it in a deck eventually. It's an awesome budget card for lands. Enters tapped, sack it unless you tap an untapped artifact or land you control, and then you can tap it to add 1 mana of any color. Now, these 2, Myriad Landscape and Temple of the False God. Temple of the False God adds 2 mana of any 2 colorless mana to our mana pool. When we tap it, activate it if only we control 5 or more lands. It's a super situational card. I still like putting it in a deck. I don't know if it's going to be okay with this because of the 5-color shenanigans. And then Mirrored Landscape comes into play tapped, and we can tap it either for a generic wasteland or sack it 2 and tap to sack it to 2 basic land cards that share a land type. Basic land cards that share a land type, put them on the battlefield tap, then shuffle your library. So these will actually go with the rest of the lands that I didn't want to play. And now, the slow fetch lands. Theoretically, these count as an island, swamp, swamp mountain, plains forest. So the plains forest will take out another plains and add that. I want to take out an island for the Bad River. Do we take a swamp out for the Rocky Tar Pit? I think we do. And the mana base is now done. The rough draft of the mana base, version 1 of the mana base, is now done.
Actually, no, I messed up. I should have just killed that. So if a creature comes out now, I'm not going to be able to kill it for the extruder.
And this is the final deck on paper on arcadeck.com. As you can see, I like the deck. It brewed nicely. It's doing everything I wanted. We got the cards from Card King, from TCG Player. We added those into the deck. They've been firing off great. And this is the whole deck on Arcadeck. And the link will be in the description down below if you want to goldfish it, play test it, see if you like it or not. It's not going to win you a CDH game, but you'll have fun doing some D&D stuff with this deck. As you can see here, just the color distribution. The pips were correct for the most part now. And you can just see the nice mana curve right there. We definitely curve out at 4. We're playing a lot of cards, playing a lot of card types and categories as well. Lots of land, but, blink and whatnot. And this is the tokens that you're going to need. A clue, a copy, a fairy dragon, a treasure, a 2/2 zombie, and then the 4 dungeons And this is the deck on Arena. I had to use Niv Mizzet Guild Pack just to get all 5 colors in. It's not the same. It's drastically different. But if you want to play this deck on Arena to get almost the same vibe, here it is. Pause the video, get the list down, go for it. Hey, new face, who dis? Some of the voiceovers was before my flare-up of Bell's palsy happened, and this is definitely after my flare-up of Bell's palsy happened. I'm kind of lucky and thankful that I caught it the day it happened, and it's been 10 years since I've had a flare-up. As you can tell, nothing happens on one side of my face, but I'm lucky that I can close my eye. And I have eye patches just to make sure for editing and shows and whatnot. That being said, that's the process of me going through and creating a commander deck. I'm glad that you were able to watch and enjoy and hopefully enjoy my journey into making a commander deck. Now, mind you, this deck is not going to win you a competitive tournament. It's not even that powerful, but it is a lot of fun to play. And from goldfishing on Arena, the Arena version, and actually like goldfishing the paper version that I have, I've been having a blast going through dungeons, rolling dice, and it's about as close to D&D as you can get in Magic the Gathering. My name's been Dom Douglas, the back-to-back commentator of the year for XWW. Thank you for watching on the YouTube channel this podcast here, Goblin Grenade, and may your top deck always be mythic. And at this point, this should clear up, and I should be in Jersey by the time you see this.